Hi everyone, it's Gary Nixon here with the latest planning video updated on Monday the 14th of January. Now if nothing else, the weather pattern's looking interesting as we head into the second half of January, all starting really from Wednesday as a marked cold front sinks southwards. After that, the mountain terrain substantially frozen. There'll be some snow at times. The absolute detail though as we go towards the weekend and into next week is very uncertain, but the prevailing trend is looking cold. Let's have a look at temperatures then, and this is the 850 millibar level, and that's now down to between 4,000 and 4,500 feet, around 1,200 to 1,400 metres thereabouts, so you're representative of that level of the highest tops in Scotland. And this is for Wednesday, and that's where we see the cold front sinking southwards. The temperatures ahead of that above freezing, behind it dropping quickly below, and freezing levels down to 600 metres or lower, and dropping as time goes on through Wednesday into Thursday. Much colder air then sweeps into Scotland. Temperatures at that level down to -8, -9 shown from the model. So we'll see how the observations pan out, say, on Cairngorm Summit by this time. That's into Thursday. Now generally onwards into Friday and the weekend, that cold air stays in place. The complication just comes in across Ireland into parts of England and Wales as an area of low pressure tries to move in. It may just lift freezing levels to some extent for Wales and the Pennines. But it looks as though the very cold air stays in place for Scotland, so frosty conditions, terrain frozen from low levels up then really, with some snow that will have fallen, although I don't think anything too excessive at this stage, but just enough to give the mountains a covering. And overall, as we head on through the weekend into next week, that cold air mass stays in place. How the detail pans out into next week, we'll have to wait and see, but overall it just looks as though the cold pattern will prevail. Let's take you through the synoptic charts for these next few days ahead, and for Tuesday it's all about mild air within this warm sector that's coming in from the Atlantic. The cold front, which is out to the west, is what will change the air mass through into Wednesday. For Tuesday though, it's a very wet day across the west and northwest Highlands. 75 to 100 mil is possible over the western mountains, patchy rain elsewhere, and upland gales pretty widespread. By the time we get through into the middle of Wednesday though, things on the move, that cold front sweeping southwards, some heavy bursts of rain on that, and may well be clearing through for many areas, even across Wales and the Pennines early in the morning. What will follow is a mess of heavy showers with some hail, some thunder, snow mixed in as well, and that will locally become very frequent. There'll be some spots where sunshine comes through for a good few hours, maybe the Central Highlands, the Southeast Highlands faring best for being in some shelter, but bands of hail and snow showers could well feed in to the Northern Highlands, and that could set in pretty frequently over a good few hours. Winds changing quickly and severe wind chill with those temperatures very cold. Thursday starts windy with a northwesterly in charge, but as pressure becomes slack the wind will drop out, and essentially it's a day of terrain being frozen, one or two areas of snow showers tending to fade, and then sunshine pretty widely. The next complication is what happens to this area of low pressure centred over the Atlantic and exactly what that does as we head into Friday. Now this particular model, which is not necessarily backed up by all of them, pulls that low pretty extensively in, and you're going to get a mix of rain, sleet and snow across the Pennines and southern Scotland if this is to be believed. Other indications don't bring that as far in and keep essentially higher pressure nearer to us, and it could just be that any rain on this system affects Ireland, maybe southwest England and Wales, and it leaves Scotland and northern England substantially dry and with frosty conditions dominating again. So Friday, even at this stage, 4 or 5 days ahead, is a very difficult one, hence the uncertainty further down the line. What seems likely though through into the weekend is that pressure will be fairly high, the air mass will be cold as we've seen, and something of low pressure is either across the south of England or somewhere still out across Ireland. Again, up for grabs just where that is going to be. The wind's looking fairly light for many, the scope I suppose for an east, perhaps even southeasterly to be gusty around Wales and the Pennines. But essentially it could well be a fair and cold winter's day, particularly in Scotland where you're nearer to high pressure. So in the short term, in terms of accumulations of snow, probably not a great deal in total, enough in places where you see the showers to give a covering on the mountain, so a change from what we've seen, but almost don't be over eager for getting snow too soon. I think if we are going to go into more snowy patterns, that might well be more into next week. Now just to run on the big picture then, and this is all averaging things out, this model that we use here is essentially the average of many models all cobbled together, so the trends do tend to be a bit more vague. We're trying to just get a general picture. What may just happen, and the indication today on the models is that around, say, Sunday, perhaps into Monday of next week, is that we just see a brief lift of freezing level. So we could find that it goes back to, say, 800 metres or even briefly above, and at sea level your temperatures are back to fairly average, sort of 6s and 7s, so you're not talking deep winter. But I think the trend as we go onwards into next week, beyond the 20th, 21st and further on, is that low pressure will take hold, colder air masses will then extend more broadly across the country. And notice the 528 line that's shown on this chart. Now that's the level at 500 millibars. That's sort of halfway up the troposphere. And where we get that line across the country, it means that essentially we're under a much more polar air mass, and the whole country then is into colder patterns, and temperatures at sea level might only be 3 or 4 degrees and possibly even lower. So the trend for next week generally is that low pressure will be in charge. Now the detail from day to day is uncertain. There's a greater risk of there being some snowfalls. There may well be periods of upland gales and blizzard conditions if this does get going during next week. And overall, that low and that trough, trying to feed around eventually a pattern more from the north or perhaps even northeast, could well just dominate that week. So essentially, winter conditions ought to prevail through that final week or so of January. So I think that's all we can get out of it for now. We just need to see how things pan out beyond the upcoming weekend. I think that's where some of the more interesting weather patterns are trying to unfold. We'll update the video again later on this week. Keep up to date every single day with your local forecasts at the Mountain Weather website. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.